Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Trivisa Triton. This is a nice larger knife from Trivisa, coming in at 8.66 inches long. It has a 3.89 inch, we call that modified sheep's foot blade there. It should be a pretty versatile blade because you have a very low tip and you do still have a slight bit of belly there. So doing cuts on a flat cutting surface should be a breeze. In-hand cut should be excellent as well because you don't have a crazy belly that you're gonna come sliding out of your cut. Your blade steel on this one's 14C, 28N steel. Love it. Great budget steel. Takes a stupid sharp edge and it's a very stable edge. It's a tough steel, has excellent corrosion resistance, and it has a decent edge retention. I think one of my favorite things about 14C is how easy it is to hone back and how well it responds to stropping. Your spine has two functional rows of jimping there. You got a little ramp here, and this section of the scales comes down. So in the choke back position, you got a nice spot there to lock in. And if you look in this first little hump, you have another row of jimping there. So if you're either right here or right here, to kind of control that tip a little better, I think it would have been awesome if they would have put another little row right there for getting all the way down to that tip so you can control it even better. But it wasn't a problem. I did do a lot of cuts like that and it wasn't a problem for me at all. You have thumb lugs. We'll talk about that more in the deployment, but as you can see, they stay out of the cutting path. Your blade stock thickness on this one's 0.143 inches thick. You have a nice full flat grind satin finish on this one, and they managed to get it down nice and thin to around 15 thousandths behind the edge. So this one should be a slicing machine, and we're going to find out. This one came with a great edge out of box, and it has good edge geometry, especially for being, a short grind height, but that full flat ground blade is making it pass through the material very, very nicely. Not to mention you got a nice long blade there. I mean, it's got to be getting close to, it's probably about 3 3/4 inch, maybe 4 inch. I can't remember offhand. That thumb stud is out of the cutting path. And it seems like a well thought out blade. Those ridges are perfect for the different grips. And now to the ergos. I was kind of worried that the little hump in the middle was going to cause an issue whenever I was doing this portion. And, for the most part, I thought it was just as comfortable as most flat scaled knives. Now, it definitely felt different, having that hump in the middle, just because that's where my middle finger sits. But at the same time, it adds a little bit extra width right there, so it made it a lot more sturdy in the hand, being that it gets a lot narrower toward the butt end of the knife. So yeah, not bad at all. And I lifted it up onto the block just because the belly is very subtle. I could have probably done it on a flat cutting surface, but it would have just been a pain for me, and I already hate doing this test anyway. So I figure, why not? It's got a good bite to that edge, and I've tested a bunch of Trivisas at this point, and I've never had any that did bad. As long as they got a good edge on them, they all seem to do really well. They're pretty good at giving you pretty good edge geometry. I haven't had too many of them that were super thick, and most of them slice pretty darn well. It was passing through this material easily, and the pinch grip was nice and comfortable. You can see I used that front portion of the edge quite a bit, doing all the sisal rope, and then the next test we're going to be doing a lot with that portion as well. And right now I'm feeling the edge, and it still feels sharp up there in the front. And the one awesome thing about 14C is, as long as you don't have edge damage, you can usually strop that edge back, especially if you're using a diamond compound on leather. And that's probably what I'll do after this. I'm going to try to get as much as I can out of it before I sharpen it. But yeah, this one's really going to shine at doing these detailed cuts with the tip. And I'm going to show you here that you can do these cuts on a flat cutting surface, but it's just that sisal rope. That's a different beast, and I just chose not to because it's just, yeah, it's no fun. But everything else, I thought it did a fantastic job. Another one for Trivisa, great job. This one was another enjoyable one to test. Nothing seemed off or anything. Yeah, I did put it up on the blog just because it was spreading the material out. But excellent job once again. I thought it performed great. Just about like every Trivisa knife that I've tested on this channel, they all perform really well. So when it comes to the action, you have the trifecta here. You have a back flipper, front flipper, and thumb studs. Thumb studs, excellent. I wasn't sure. I'm never really a fan of these thumb lugs, whatever you want to call them, but you can see how they have that little chamfer on the side right there, and you have the jimps. Well, that's exactly where your thumb fits. And those are titanium studs there. And then same with the reverse flick. See how it's done right there? Put your fingernail underneath that and it reverse flicks amazing. And then whew, nice and controlled drop on there. Nice and snappy action. But they have a detent dial for thumb. What about the rest? Your flipper, as you can see, it's sitting in front of the pivot, so you're going to have tons of leverage there. Once that blade takes over, it comes flying around. And you even have chamfers on both sides for your landing pad right there for when you come down. It's always a nice touch, something you usually see on more premium knives. And then I like how they did this, the front flipper, they got it canted as well. So even though I'm usually never a fan of front flippers when you got the flipper back here, because that's usually where I'm usually sitting right there. Well, because of the way this is canted back, I don't have to creep on up, and they got jimping that does a great job of gripping the finger. It works fantastic. And then being it's a liner lock, you can do the reach around, but the detent is dialed more for doing it just the regular way, in my opinion, or at least on mine. But yeah, dialed to perfection, all three actions, that's very hard to do. And it gets that smoothness because it's riding on cage ceramic ball bearings. And boy, this one keeps breaking in more and more and more every time I carry it and use it. Very, very nicely done there. All right, let's close it up. Take a look at this handle area. I have the blue micarta variant. They also have two G10 variations as well. They may have more than that, but I remember like a gray and I forget what the other color is. I love this color, blue on the micarta. It is smooth, but it's nice and grippy. You got some chamfers and just some decorative milling here. One right here as well. They did a good job. I don't know if it's coming through, but they knocked this hard edge off so it's not sharp right there. And you got a lot of handle here. Got same color, blue micarta backspacer. That gear pattern's flush with the scales. Integrated lanyard loop into that backspacer. And as you can see, you got the taps for lefty, so you have the tip up, left or right-handed carry, deep carry. You know, it's fairly deep. You got that sticking out, so at least if you like to carry lanyards, it'll be sitting above the seam of your pants. And I would have loved to see this clip inset into the micarta. However, I don't know if it's coming across there either, but that lip on the front of the clip right there is smoothed over. So I hadn't had any issues going in and out. Plus, they countersunk those screws, so that's at least a plus. Now, another thing I wish I would have seen on this one, you have a nice Torx T8 for your pivot, but all your body screws and your clip screws are Torx T6. It's not the end of the world, especially on a budget knife, but it would have been really nice to have all T8. That way I wouldn't have to swap drivers, and T8 are a lot less likely to strip out than T6. Now, I've taken apart just about every single one of my Trivisa knives, and I've never had any of their screws strip on me yet, knock on wood, but, you know, they don't seem to be using any soft ones, so that's not a deal breaker for me at least. It does carry nice and slim in the pocket, and that clip is sitting in the middle of the scale, so it rides nicely. Now, if you do put a phone or anything in there, you just got to be aware it is going to rub against this flipper tab. But as you can see on this side, it's nice and rounded right there. So maybe on the way out, you might catch that jimping. But, you know, other than that, it's fine. Look how nice and crisp that jimping is. They did a good job with this jimping and this jimping. It does a fantastic job of gripping the finger without being overly grippy or sharp. And there's a good shot of that angled thumb lug, that titanium thumb lug. And look, you can see they even knock off like any of the little tips. They do a good job. I got to admit, whoever their OEM is, I don't think they make their own. Maybe they might, I don't know. But whoever does it does a great job. Now, I'll be honest, whenever I looked at this knife in general, I kind of, it's not your typical knife, but I kind of like different sometimes, and I'm so glad I took a chance on this one. And initially, I looked at this and I was like, oh, that's going to be awful. But that's why I test these knives. So, this spot right here, it's thumb melting right there. Very good. Now, I will say initially when I first got it in hand before I started actually doing cutting, I was like, yeah, I don't know about this one. It's going to feel kind of awkward because this fits right here. And this one kind of sits in the middle of that sometimes, or I can kind of choke back. It's just however I want to hold it. But oddly, it didn't bother me. I did not really even notice that, even though this is a narrow section right here, I'm guessing because of that wider section that fills out the hand a little bit better, it was comfortable. Now, was it the most comfortable in the world? No, it's flat scale, so it could have been more comfortable if they would have been completely contoured. You get kind of a contoured feeling because of the chamfers and stuff, but for a flat scale knife, I think it was comfortable. It's definitely different. Initially, it may feel a little wonky in hand, but after you start using it, you'll see what I'm talking about. Reverse grip right here is very comfortable. The flipper tabs kind of stays out of the way of this area like you normally feel it. And the reverse gas station knife fight grip, not the most comfortable because of this backspacer right there, because that's where you'd be sticking your finger, but I don't ever do this grip unless I'm sticking it into a log, but I kind of do it in the hammer grip like that. And this in the typical blade shape I would do that with anyway. So as far as the weight, I thought this one was going to be pretty heavy because you got, not super thick blade stock, but pretty thick. You got those stainless steel liners, and it's a larger knife. So if you look in here, you got tons of pocketing on that show side scale. It goes all the way to the micarta to bring down the weight as much as they possibly could. And if you look on the lock side, even on the lock side, they did a ton of weight relieving, I'm sure, not only to bring the weight down, but to balance the knife out. This one comes in at 3.87 ounces, and it doesn't even feel that heavy. That's definitely because the balance point on this one, let me put it right where it needs to be, is absolute perfection. So it's not butt heavy, not blade heavy. It's going to feel way more nimble in hand. It's not going to feel like it's loose in the hand where it's going to tip one way or the other. Excellent job on that. I love a knife that's perfectly balanced, and Trivisa usually does a good job of that. This one is a stainless steel liner lock, and you have about 40% engagement, I'd say, right there. And access to the lock bar is fantastic. See that? You got a lot of room. This comes down lower. That chamfer, even though I don't usually love texture, the way it's spaced out like that, you don't really notice that texture. It's very comfortable for me to get my thumb in there. Very easy for me to get my thumb in there. I can use this portion too very easily. Nice solid lockup. No movement in any direction on my particular knife. Excellent job. Exactly what I like to see. Now for some size comparisons, it's bigger than both the Ontario Rat 1 and 2. So you can see it's a pretty big knife. Rat 1's a fairly larger knife. And it's just a hair shorter than the Trivisa Virgo, and it's a little longer than the Trivisa Uma. And of course, it's shorter than the Trivisa Intruder and is similar in size to the Trivisa Phoenix. And lastly, it's a little smaller than the Artisan Cutlery Accelerator, and it's just a hair longer than the Syncut Fantera. Now, being that no knife's perfect, let's go over some nitpicks and complaints. First off, I would have loved to see this sharpening choil come out a little bit further. However, I do like that they brought the plunge grind at least to right here, so I can get a couple of sharpenings before it'll start to widen on me, and that should be a fairly easy fix as long, let's check it, as long as it doesn't contact, yeah. The stop pin is way up here, so you can do whatever you need, and you can see how thin that blade is right there at the plunge right there. Also, it would have been nice to have T8 construction throughout, and it'd be nice to have this clip-in set into the micarta. Not the end of the world. None of those are hurting the functionality of the knife, in my opinion, at all. So if you like larger knives that perform well, have great action, fidgety action, because you got so many deployment methods to do. So if you're a front flipper person, they got you covered. If you're a regular flipper person, they got you covered. Or if you're like me and you prefer the thumb action or the reverse flick, they got you covered there as well. Not to mention, you're getting a lot of knife for 56 bucks. You know, that's one thing that Trivisa offers. They're not a huge company, and they're bringing the knives to you at a very, very reasonable price. Or I think an excellent price, personally. I was going to do a size comparison with the Trivisa Columba, one of my favorite Trivisas, but I cannot seem to find it. Oh, that's a problem. But another excellent knife from Trivisa. If you're interested in the Trivisa Triton, I will have it linked down below in the description. It will be an affiliate link, so if you want to help support this channel, that's the only way to really do so. I can't thank you enough. If not, no sweat at all. If you have any questions in particular, feel free to ask me down below, and I'll do my best to get back with you. I hope every one of y'all is having a fantastic day. Remember, keep those blades sharp. Smile more.